The mahogany dining table fell silent as Mum casually mentioned they'd use my inheritance to fund Brandon's third startup. 30 years of being the responsible daughter shattered in seconds. What hurt most wasn't losing Grandma Eleanor's money, but realising my own parents saw me as nothing but their backup plan. If you've ever felt that punch to the gut moment when family betrays you, you know exactly what I felt that day. I'm still processing what happened, and honestly, sharing this helps me make sense of it all. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments. If my story resonates with you, please subscribe to follow my journey. The support means everything when your own family has broken your trust. Now let me take you back to before my world turned upside down. My name is Emily Williams. I'm 34 years old, and until 3 months ago I thought I knew exactly who I was in my family. The responsible eldest daughter. The reliable one. The one who put her dreams on hold whenever family needed help. I've worked as an accountant at Mitchell & Associates for the past 12 years. It's not the glamorous career I once dreamed of. I originally wanted to travel as a financial consultant for international businesses, but it's steady work that paid the bills. It also gave me the expertise to manage my parents' finances, which I've done for free since my father's minor heart attack 7 years ago. Every month I would organise their bills, help with tax planning, and make sure their retirement accounts were on track. I never complained. That's just what family does, right? Then there's my younger brother Brandon, the golden child. At 31, he's bounced between entrepreneurial ventures that inevitably crash and burn. First was an artisanal coffee subscription service that lasted 8 months before he got bored. Then came a fitness app that never made it past the development stage because he couldn't find investors who shared his vision. Despite these failures, our parents, Richard and Margaret Williams, never lost faith in him. Brandon just hasn't found his path yet, Mum would say. He's a visionary. Meanwhile, Dad would clap him on the back and hand over another cheque to tide him over until success inevitably found him. I never resented their support of Brandon. Not really. We all need different things from our parents, and maybe he needed more encouragement than I did. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting sometimes, especially when I'd watch them rearrange their finances to accommodate his latest scheme while praising me for being so self-sufficient. My personal life was finally coming together, though. After years of putting relationships second to work and family obligations, I'd met Nathan 2 years ago. He was different. He understood my commitments and supported them without making me feel guilty. 8 months ago he proposed, and we started planning our future together. The centrepiece of that future was buying our first home. That's where Grandma Eleanor's inheritance came in. My grandmother was a remarkable woman. She raised 3 children on her own after my grandfather died young, built a successful real estate business in our small Midwestern town, and still managed to be the most present grandparent anyone could ask for. She and I had a special bond. While she loved all her grandchildren, she would often tell me I reminded her of herself, practical, determined, loyal. "Emily," she'd say during our Sunday afternoon teas in her sunroom, "I've watched you put yourself last for years. You've earned every bit of happiness coming your way." The last time I saw her before her stroke, she'd squeezed my hand and said, "I've made sure you'll be taken care of, sweetheart. When the time comes, you'll have what you need to build your life without worry." It wasn't just about the money. It was her way of saying she saw how hard I worked, how much I sacrificed. It was validation that someone noticed. When Grandma Eleanor passed away 3 months ago, our family was devastated. She was our matriarch, our moral compass. The funeral was beautiful but brutal. I held my mother as she sobbed through the service, organised the reception afterward, and spent weeks helping my parents sort through Grandma's belongings. Meanwhile, Brandon was finding himself on a European trip that our parents insisted. He needed to process his grief. The will reading was postponed until Brandon returned. Grandma's lawyer, Mr. Harrington, mentioned there were specific bequests for each family member, but the details would wait until we were all present. Based on my conversations with Grandma, I expected to receive the bulk of her estate, not because I felt entitled to it, but because she had explicitly told me so. Nathan and I had already met with a realtor and were pre-approved for a mortgage that, combined with my inheritance, would allow us to purchase a beautiful craftsman home in a neighbourhood we otherwise couldn't afford. 2 weeks ago, my parents called and invited me to a special family dinner at their house. "It's time we discussed your grandmother's will," Mum said. "Brandon's back from Europe, and we have some exciting news to share." Something in her voice set off alarm bells. I'd noticed her being secretive about financial documents when I'd stopped by to help with bills the week before. When I asked about some unusual withdrawals from their joint account, she'd quickly changed the subject. The night of the dinner, I pulled into my parents' driveway and immediately noticed their living room had been redecorated with expensive new furniture. A sleek entertainment system I'd never seen before dominated one wall. For people who had been complaining about tight finances just months ago, this sudden splurge struck me as odd. Little did I know, I was about to discover just how odd and devastating things would get. I stood in the entryway of my childhood home, taking in the dramatic changes. The worn leather sofa where I'd spent countless hours reading had been replaced with a modern sectional that must have cost thousands. Crystal light fixtures I'd never seen before sparkled overhead. "Emily, you're here!" My mother's voice carried from the kitchen, unnaturally bright. She emerged, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her blonde hair freshly highlighted. "Brandon just arrived too." As if summoned, my brother appeared from the hallway. He looked tanned and well-rested from his European grief trip, sporting designer clothes and a new watch that gleamed on his wrist. "Sis!" He enveloped me in a hug that smelled of expensive cologne. "Good to see you." "You too," I said, pulling back to study him. "Europe agreed with you." "Life-changing." He nodded solemnly, though his eyes sparkled with an excitement that seemed inappropriate given the reason for his trip. I gained so much perspective. Dad appeared from his study, greeting me with a kiss on the cheek. "There's my girl. How's the number-crunching business?" "Fine," I replied, still distracted by the home makeover. "Business as usual." "Well, let's not stand around," Mum said. "Dinner's ready and we have so much to discuss." The dining room, at least, remained unchanged. The mahogany table that had been in our family for generations was set with Grandma Eleanor's china, another detail that struck me as odd. We usually only used it for holidays. Throughout the appetizer, a shrimp cocktail that I knew my father, usually considered too fancy for a family dinner, conversation remained superficial. Brandon regaled us with tales of European architecture and chance meetings with interesting strangers. My parents hung on his every word, exchanging glances I couldn't quite interpret. "How's the house hunting going?" Dad finally asked me as Mum served a roast that must have cost a small fortune. "Good," I said cautiously. "Nathan and I found a place we love. We're just waiting on finalising some details before making an offer. The inheritance details, I meant, though I didn't say it explicitly." "About that," Mum said, an odd smile playing at her lips. "We wanted to talk to you about Grandma Eleanor's will." The air in the room seemed to thicken. Brandon suddenly became very interested in buttering his roll. "Mr. Harrington gave us the details last week," Dad continued. "As executor, I've been working with him to distribute assets." "I see," I said, setting down my fork. "I thought we were all going to meet with him together." "Well, that was the original plan," Mum said. "But given Brandon's situation, we thought it best to expedite things." "Brandon's situation?" I echoed. My mother beamed at my brother. "Tell her your news." Brandon straightened in his chair. "While I was in Amsterdam, I met this amazing tech. Developer. We got talking and I shared my idea for a revolutionary investment app. He thinks it could be the next big thing, Em. We're talking potential unicorn status. That sounds interesting, I said carefully, having heard similar pitches before. It's more than interesting, Dad interjected. Brandon's new partner has connections to major venture capitalists, but they need seed money to develop the prototype. A sense of dread began blooming in my stomach. And? That's when Mum dropped the bomb, as casually as if commenting on the weather. So we've decided to use your inheritance to fund Brandon's startup. It's really the perfect solution. The table fell silent. I stared at my mother, certain I'd misheard. My inheritance, I finally managed. Well, technically, it was just a portion of Grandma's estate that she suggested might go to you, Dad clarified. But as executor, I have some discretion in how the assets are distributed for maximum family benefit. Suggested might go to me, I repeated, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Grandma Eleanor explicitly told me. Conversations aren't legally binding, honey, Mum interrupted, her tone condescending. The will gave your father considerable leeway. I don't understand, I said, struggling to maintain composure. How much of my inheritance are we talking about? My parents exchanged glances. All of it, Dad finally said. The full 450,000. The room tilted slightly. The down payment for our house, our future security, the validation of years of being the responsible one. Gone. But what about our house? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Nathan and I were counting on that money. Brandon jumped in. That's the beauty of this, Em. When the app takes off, and it will, you'll get your investment back tenfold. Think big picture. Investment, I said. I didn't invest in anything. You're taking my inheritance. Now, Emily. Dad's voice took on the stern tone he used when I was being difficult as a teenager. You've always been so good with money. You'll figure something out. Brandon needs this opportunity more than you need a fancy house. We've already transferred the first installment to Brandon's business account, Mum added, serving herself more potatoes as if we were discussing nothing more important than the weather forecast. The developers in Amsterdam are starting work. Next week. My mind raced, trying to process what was happening. You've already transferred the money, without even discussing it with me first. We knew you'd be upset initially, Dad said. But once you calm down and think rationally, you'll see this is best for everyone. Besides, Mum added with a tight smile, you have a good job. Brandon is still establishing himself. As the reality sank in, another horrifying thought occurred to me. How long have you been planning this? Before or after Grandma died? The momentary discomfort that flashed across my mother's face gave me my answer. You knew before she died? Were you the ones who suggested she postpone updating her will? The pieces were falling into place. Grandma had mentioned wanting to make some changes to her estate planning after Brandon's second business failure, but she'd never gotten around to it before her stroke. That's enough, Emily, Dad said sharply. Your grandmother wanted to support this family, and that's exactly what we're doing. Brandon's success will benefit all of us. I looked at my brother, who at least had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. And you're okay with this? Taking what Grandma meant for me? He shrugged, his momentary discomfort evaporating. It's not like you need it, sis. You and Nathan have 2 incomes. This is my big chance. In that moment, 34 years of being the perfect daughter crystallized into perfect clarity. I had never truly been seen by my own family. I was just the reliable backup plan, the safety net for Brandon's ambitions, the free financial advisor, the unpaid emotional support. I need to go, I said, standing so abruptly my chair nearly toppled. Don't be dramatic, Mum sighed. At least finish dinner. I made your favourite dessert. but I was already gathering my purse, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grasp my keys. "I'll call you later," I lied, knowing I wouldn't. As I reached the door, Brandon called out, "Hey, when you've calmed down, I'd love to show you the business plan. You could even help with the financial projections if you want." I didn't trust myself to respond. I simply closed the door behind me and made it to my car before the tears came, hot and furious, blurring the familiar streets of my childhood neighbourhood as I drove away from the family that had just betrayed me in the most casual way imaginable. I don't remember much about the drive home. Muscle memory guided me through familiar turns, while my mind replayed the dinner conversation in excruciating detail. By the time I pulled into the apartment complex where Nathan and I lived, my shock had hardened into something darker. Nathan was waiting up, despite the late hour. One look at my face told him everything he needed to know. "What happened?" he asked, guiding me to the couch. The story spilled out in fragmented sentences, punctuated by fresh waves of tears. Nathan listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly disturbed. "They just announced it." "Like it was already decided?" he finally asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Like they were telling me the weather forecast," I confirmed, wiping my eyes. $450,000. Gone. Just like that. Nathan pulled me close. "We'll figure this out, Em. There has to be something we can do legally." But my mind was already spiralling through memories, recontextualizing them with my new understanding. The time my parents had forgotten to attend my college graduation because Brandon had a minor sports injury. The Christmas when my carefully chosen gifts for everyone sat unopened, while the family fawned over Brandon's last-minute gas station purchases. The way they'd discouraged me from accepting a job offer in Chicago. "We need you close to home, Emily." Only to celebrate Brandon's 6-month finding himself trip to California the very next year. "It's not just about the money," I said, my voice hollow. "It's that they've always seen me as dispensable, useful when they need something, invisible when they don't." "That's their failure," Nathan said firmly, "not yours." My phone buzzed with a text. "Mom, hope you got home safe. Don't forget you promised to help Dad with the tax projections this weekend." No acknowledgement of what had happened, no recognition that anything had changed. The audacity was breathtaking. More messages followed throughout the next day. Dad asking about refinancing options for their vacation property. Brandon sending a "thank you for supporting my dream, sis." Text complete with champagne emojis. Each notification made me physically ill. I cancelled our appointment with the realtor. Janet had been so excited to show us the Craftsman house again, but I couldn't bear to walk through rooms we now had no hope of affording. Nathan suggested we look at less expensive options, but my heart wasn't in it. The dream home represented more than just a place to live. It was meant to be tangible proof that someone in my family valued me. 3 days after the dinner, I tried reaching out to my father alone, hoping he might be more reasonable without my mother's influence. I met him for coffee at a neutral location, a small cafe downtown. "Dad," I began carefully after we'd exchanged stilted pleasantries, "I need to understand what happened with Grandma's will. She told me specifically that she was leaving her estate to me." He shifted uncomfortably. "Your grandmother said a lot of things, Emily, but what matters is what was legally documented." "And what exactly was documented?" I pressed. "I'd like to see the will." "That's not necessary," he dismissed. "As executor, I've reviewed everything with Mr. Harrington. The distribution is being handled appropriately." "I think I have a right to see it." Dad's expression hardened. "You're overreacting. This is about what's best for the family as a whole. Brandon's business could secure all our futures." "Just like his last 2 ventures?" I couldn't help asking. "That's unfair. He's found the right opportunity now." I tried a different angle. Did Grandma know that her money would go to Brandon's startup? A flicker of something, guilt, crossed his face before he masked it. Eleanor trusted me to make the right decisions. The conversation went nowhere. My father was immovable, alternating between dismissing my concerns and making me feel selfish for even raising them. My attempt to speak with my mother the next day went even worse. "If you really loved your brother, you'd want him to succeed," she said when I confronted her at her favourite lunch spot. "Family supports each other, Emily. I'm disappointed that you're being so self-centred about this." "Self-centred?" I echoed in disbelief. "I've spent my entire life supporting this family. I manage your finances. I organised Grandma's funeral. I'm the one who's always there when anyone needs anything." "And we appreciate that," she said with a patronising smile. "But Brandon needs this chance. You're already established." "I put my life on hold for years to help everyone else get established," I reminded her, fighting to keep my voice steady. Nathan and I were counting on that inheritance to finally start our own life. My mother reached across the table to pat my hand. "Sweetheart, you've always been so practical. You'll find another way to buy a house. But opportunities like Brandon's don't come along every day." I pulled my hand away. "Did they come along when he was in Amsterdam, or before Grandma even died? How long have you been planning to redirect my inheritance?" Her silence was answer enough. That evening I received a text from Brandon that pushed me over the edge. "Hey sis, just sent you the executive summary of our business plan. Could you look it over and give feedback? Your financial expertise would be super valuable." I read through the attached document with growing disbelief. His revolutionary investment app was essentially identical to dozens already on the market. The projections were wildly unrealistic. The entire plan reeked of the same half-baked enthusiasm as his previous ventures. But what truly broke me was realising that even now, after taking my inheritance, my family still expected me to donate my time and expertise to support Brandon's dream. They weren't just taking my money, they were taking my dignity. That night, unable to sleep, I found myself pulling out the small wooden box where I kept mementos from Grandma Eleanor. Among birthday cards and pressed flowers from her garden, I found a letter she'd written me 5 years ago, after I'd helped her navigate a complicated tax situation. "My dearest Emily," it read, "your help today reminded me yet again what a capable, caring woman you've become. I want you to know that I see how much you give to this family, often at your own expense. Rest assured that when the time comes, you will be taken care of. I've made provisions to ensure you can finally put yourself first. All my love, Grandma." The letter crumpled in my shaking hands. I suddenly remembered something else. Grandma, mentioning that she'd updated her will after Brandon's coffee subscription business failed. "I've made some changes to protect everyone's interests," she'd said cryptically. What had happened to that updated will? And why had my parents been so eager to handle everything without me present? A suspicion began forming in my mind. What if there was more to this situation than I knew? What if my parents hadn't just redirected my inheritance, but had actively interfered with Grandma's wishes? I needed to find out the truth. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to play the role of the understanding, accommodating daughter. It was time to stand up for myself, even if it meant standing against my own family. The realisation that my parents might have actively interfered with Grandma Eleanor's wishes transformed my grief into something more focused: determination. As an accountant, I dealt in verifiable facts and paper trails. If there was evidence of manipulation, I would find it. I started with what I knew best: finances. For years, I'd managed my parents' accounts, filing their taxes and organising their records. They'd given me access to their online banking and investment portfolios, likely never imagining I'd use that access to investigate them. Late at night, after Nathan had gone to bed, I began combing through years of transactions. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Just the regular pattern of household expenses, retirement contributions and occasional splurges, But as I dug deeper into the past 3 years, a pattern emerged. Regular transfers to Brandon. 5,000 here, 8,000. There, often labelled vaguely as family support or business investment. The amounts had increased dramatically in the months before Grandma Eleanor's death. My parents had been financially supporting Brandon to a degree they'd never disclosed to me, despite my role as their financial advisor. Ever found yourself looking at evidence that completely reshapes your understanding of your past? It's disorienting. All those times my parents had claimed they couldn't help me with graduate school because money was tight, or suggested I take on extra accounting, clients to afford a better apartment. They'd had the resources. They'd just chosen to direct them elsewhere. I need to pause here and acknowledge how much your support means while sharing this painful journey. If you've experienced family betrayal, you know the isolation that follows. Drop a heart in the comments if you've ever discovered family secrets that changed everything. It helps to know we're not alone. Now, back to unravelling what my parents had been hiding. More disturbing were the transactions I found from the period immediately after Grandma's stroke. 3 significant withdrawals from my parents' savings account, totalling nearly $15,000, all within days of each other. The timing coincided with an extended visit from Brandon that I'd been too busy organising hospice care to pay much attention to. I needed more information, and I knew exactly who might have it. Judith Blackwell had been Grandma Eleanor's best friend for over 40 years. They'd met in a community college class they'd both taken after their children were in school, and had remained inseparable until Grandma's death. If anyone knew about changes to the will, it would be Judith. I called her the next morning, claiming I needed help sorting through some of Grandma's personal effects. Judith invited me over immediately. Her cosy bungalow smelled like cinnamon and old books. After serving tea in delicate cups that reminded me painfully of afternoons with Grandma, Judith studied my face. "This isn't about sorting photographs, is it, dear?" she asked gently. The kindness in her eyes broke something in me. I told her everything, the family dinner, the stolen inheritance, my growing suspicions. Judith's expression darkened as I spoke. When I finished, she set down her teacup with a decisive click. "I was afraid of something like this," she said. "Eleanor was very clear about her intentions for you." "You knew about the will?" I asked. "Not just knew about it. I witnessed it," Judith confirmed. "About 8 months before her stroke, after that gambling incident with Brandon." I nearly spilled my tea. "Gambling incident?" Judith's eyes widened. "You don't know. Oh dear. Eleanor wanted to protect the family from embarrassment, but I assumed you at least knew." The story Judith told next confirmed my worst fears and added new ones. Brandon had developed a gambling problem during his entrepreneurial phase. What my parents had described as business failures were actually gambling debts disguised as startup costs. Grandma Eleanor had discovered this when Brandon had come to her directly, asking for $50,000 to save his business from aggressive investors. "Eleanor wasn't born yesterday," Judith said. "She hired a private investigator who uncovered the truth. Brandon had lost everything to online poker and sports betting. The investors were actually loan sharks." My hands trembled around my teacup. And my parents, did they know? They denied it at first, but Eleanor confronted them with evidence. They admitted they'd been covering for him for years. That's when she changed her will. She left specific instructions that her estate would go primarily to you, with strict conditions on any money Brandon might receive, namely, completion of a gambling addiction program. "Do you know who has a copy of this will?" I asked, my mind racing. "Eleanor's personal attorney, James Foster, not the family lawyer your father uses." Judith rose and retrieved a business card from a drawer. She kept Mr. Harrington for family matters, but used James for her personal affairs. "I'm surprised he hasn't contacted you." I wasn't. If my parents had accessed Grandma's papers first, they could have intercepted any communications. Leaving Judith's, I drove straight to a storage facility across town. After Grandma's death, I'd carefully packed her personal papers and mementos, intending to sort through them when I felt emotionally ready. My parents had been surprisingly eager to have these boxes out of their house and into storage. Now I understood why. For 3 hours, I methodically went through every folder, every envelope. In a leather portfolio labelled Personal Correspondence, I found what I was looking for: carbon copies of letters between Grandma Eleanor and attorney James Foster, discussing revisions to her will. The most recent was dated just 2 months before her stroke. As discussed, the letter read, the revisions specify that the bulk of your estate, approx $450,000, will go directly to your granddaughter Emily Williams, with the family home to remain with your son Richard. The trust for your grandson Brandon will be contingent upon his completion of the treatment program we discussed, with disbursements managed by the trustee, Emily Williams, rather than his parents. My hands shook as I read. Grandma hadn't just left me money, she'd made me the trustee of Brandon's portion. She'd trusted me to help manage his recovery, and my parents had hidden all of it. I contacted James Foster's office immediately, but hit another wall. His receptionist informed me that Mr. Foster had retired suddenly due to health issues 3 months ago, right after Grandma's death. His practice had been absorbed by a larger firm, and many of his files were still being processed. She took my information and promised someone would call me back. That call never came. The pieces were falling into place, but I needed more concrete evidence. On impulse, I hired my own private investigator, a woman named Diane Rodriguez, who specialized in financial fraud. I gave her Brandon's information and asked her to track his activities over the past year. While waiting for her findings, I took a day off work to drive to the county courthouse. Public records couldn't tell me everything, but they could tell me something. What I discovered sent chills down my spine. My parents had remortgaged their home, the home that had been paid off for 15 years, 2 months before Grandma Eleanor died. They'd taken out a loan for $200,000. Property records also showed they'd put their vacation cabin up for sale around the same time, though it had yet to sell. They were liquidating assets before Grandma even died, preparing. 3 days later, Diane Rodriguez called with her report. Your brother spent most of the past year in gambling establishments, not on business trips, she confirmed. His European grief trip included stops at casinos in Monte Carlo, Baden-Baden and Amsterdam. Based on my sources, he owes significant amounts to some very dangerous people. And the tech startup? I asked, already knowing the answer. There is a registered LLC, she said carefully, but its business address is a virtual office service. The tech partner from Amsterdam has connections to organised gambling syndicates, not venture capital firms. The final piece came when Diane sent me surveillance photos, Brandon meeting with men whose body language screamed enforcer, not business partner. One image showed him leaving such a meeting with a split lip and frightened eyes. The truth hit me like a physical blow. Brandon's revolutionary app was nothing but a front to pay off gambling debts. My inheritance wasn't funding a business, it was paying loan sharks, and my parents had known. They'd chosen to sacrifice my future, to save Brandon from his own mistakes yet again, but this time they'd gone beyond enabling. They'd actively conspired to divert my inheritance, potentially committing fraud in the process. They'd hidden Grandma Eleanor's true wishes and manipulated her estate. As I sat surrounded by evidence of my family's betrayal, I realised I faced a terrible choice. I could confront them with what I knew, potentially tearing the family apart forever, or I could swallow this bitter pill as I had swallowed so many others, accepting that my role would always be the family safety net. For the first time in my life, I knew I couldn't choose the path of least resistance. Not just for me, but for Brandon too. His gambling addiction would never improve as long as our parents continued enabling him. Grandma Eleanor had understood this. Her will hadn't just been about providing for me, it had been about saving Brandon from himself. I needed to honour her true wishes, even if it meant going to war with my own parents. The weight of what I'd discovered left me reeling. I needed perspective, someone who knew my family but wasn't blinded by the same dynamics that had shaped my relationship with my parents and Brandon. I called my cousin Rachel, my father's brother's daughter. We'd been close as children, but had drifted apart in adulthood, largely because my family commitments always seemed to prevent me from attending the gatherings where I might have seen her. "Emily?" Her surprise was evident when she answered. "It's been ages. Is everything okay?" We met at a cafe halfway between our homes. Rachel had always been more outspoken than me, less willing to smooth things over for family harmony. As I poured out my story, her expression shifted from shock to anger to a strange kind of resigned recognition. "I wish I could say I'm surprised," she finally said, "but Uncle Richard and Aunt Margaret have always had a blind spot where Brandon is concerned." "It's more than a blind spot," I said. "They actively hid Grandma Eleanor's will from me." Rachel hesitated, twirling her coffee cup. "There's something you should know, something the extended family has discussed." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean, discussed?" "Your parents have bailed Brandon out more times than you know," she said carefully. "The business failures were just the public explanation. The family knows about the gambling. We've known for years." The cafe seemed to tilt around me. "Years? Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Your parents insisted they had it under control. And honestly," she reached for my hand, "we all saw how much. You already carried for your family. No one wanted to add to your burden. So everyone just watched me being manipulated, kept in the dark while managing their finances?" The betrayal expanded beyond my immediate family to include aunts, uncles, cousins, people who'd smiled at me across holiday dinner tables while keeping secrets that directly affected my life. "It wasn't right," Rachel admitted, "but your parents were adamant that Brandon's issues stay private. They said exposure would only make his recovery harder." "Recovery?" I laughed bitterly. "He's not recovering. He's getting worse, and they're enabling him. And now they've stolen my inheritance to pay his gambling debts." Rachel's eyes widened. "Gambling debts? Are you sure?" I told her about the private investigator's findings. By the time I finished, Rachel was pale. "This is worse than I thought," she said. "Emily, you need to talk to Aunt Martha. She had a huge falling out with your dad last year over Brandon. She might know more." Aunt Martha was my father's older sister, a no-nonsense woman who'd retired from a successful legal career. I'd always admired her, though she'd grown increasingly distant from our branch of the family in recent years. Now I understood why. I called her that evening. She answered on the first ring, as if she'd been expecting me. "It's about time," she said after I'd explained why I was calling. "I've been waiting for you to figure it out." "Figure what out?" "That your parents have been using you as Brandon's safety net your entire life." The bluntness was shocking, but somehow refreshing, after years of evasions. "Your grandmother knew," Martha continued. "It's why she changed her will to protect you. Richard was furious when he found out. He expected Eleanor's money to go into the family pot, which we all know means Brandon's gambling recovery fund." "Did you know about the gambling?" I asked. "I confronted Richard about it 2 Christmases ago when Brandon showed up with a broken finger he claimed was from a skiing accident. I recognised an enforcer's work when I saw it." Martha's voice hardened. "Your father told me to mind my own business. I told him enabling an addict was destroying 2 children, not just 1. "2 children?" I echoed. "You and Brandon," she clarified. "You've been sacrificed on the altar." Of his addiction as surely as he has. You're just collateral damage. The validation of hearing someone else name what had happened to me was overwhelming. For years, I'd sensed something was wrong, but had dismissed my own feelings as selfish. Or petty. I've saved every email, Martha was saying. Every text where Richard asked for money for Brandon's business, that I knew was going to bookies. I refused to participate in the enabling, which is why I'm now the family pariah. I need your help, I said, surprising myself with my directness. I want to contest what they've done with Grandma's will. You'll have my full support, Martha said without hesitation, and my testimony if needed. Eleanor would be heartbroken to see her wishes disregarded this way. With Martha's encouragement, I reached out to others. My godmother Patricia, who had been Grandma Eleanor's other close friend, confirmed what Judith had told me. Eleanor was so proud of you, Emily, she said. She changed her will specifically to ensure you would be taken care of, since you've spent your life taking care of everyone else. Patricia revealed another critical piece of information. Grandma had suspected financial manipulation in her final months. She noticed discrepancies in her accounts, Patricia explained. Small withdrawals she couldn't remember authorizing. She was planning to change banks and revoke Richard's access, but then the stroke happened. The picture growing in my mind was ugly. Had my father been siphoning money from his own mother's accounts? The thought made me physically ill. Through all of this, Nathan remained my rock. He took days off work to accompany me to meetings, held me through tearful nights, and never once complained about our derailed house plans. This isn't just about the money anymore, he said one evening as we reviewed the evidence I'd gathered. This is about your family exploiting you for years. It has to stop, Em. Not just for us, but for Brandon too. Real love doesn't enable destruction. Even my normally reserved boss showed unexpected support when I finally broke down at work after a particularly difficult call with the county records office. Take whatever time you need, George said, closing my office door for privacy. Family financial disputes are brutal. My brother and I didn't speak for 3 years after our father's estate was settled. As word spread through the extended family that I was investigating my parents' handling of Grandma's estate, people began taking sides. Some, like Rachel and Martha, stood firmly with me. Others defended my parents, arguing that family finances were private matters and I was being selfish for not wanting to help Brandon. The family division was painful but illuminating. It revealed who truly cared about justice and who was invested in maintaining the dysfunctional status quo. More importantly, it showed me I wasn't alone, something I'd felt for most of my life, even surrounded by family. With each conversation, each piece of evidence, I gained clarity about the pattern of exploitation. I hadn't just lost an inheritance, I'd lost decades of opportunities, dreams and self-determination because my parents had designated me as the responsible one, the backup plan, the safety net for Brandon's self-destruction. As painful as this realization was, it was also liberating. For the first time, I could see the manipulation clearly, and what you can see clearly you can fight. By the end of 2 weeks of investigation, I had assembled a disturbing picture. My parents had likely been diverting funds from Grandma Eleanor's accounts before her death. They had hidden her revised will and possibly colluded with the family, lawyer to present an older version that gave my father more discretion. They had redirected my inheritance to pay Brandon's gambling debts, disguised as a business investment. And they had done all this while expecting me to continue providing free financial services and emotional support. It was time to confront them with the truth. But I knew from experience that my parents were masters of deflection and emotional manipulation. If I wanted this confrontation to be effective, I needed to be strategic. I needed a plan that would make denial impossible. Strategic confrontations require preparation, something my accounting career had taught me well. When presenting difficult financial realities to clients, I always came armed with irrefutable documentation, witnesses, and a clear agenda. This situation demanded nothing less. I began by consulting with an estate lawyer, not Mr. Harrington, who had worked with my father, but a specialist recommended by Aunt Martha. Lydia Chen had a reputation for handling contested wills with both legal precision and sensitivity to family dynamics. "Based on what you've shown me," she said after reviewing my evidence, "there appear to be grounds for contesting the execution of your grandmother's estate. The carbon copies of correspondence with her personal attorney strongly suggest the existence of a more recent will than the one your father presented. What about the money that's already been transferred to Brandon's business?" I asked. "If we can prove it was done under false pretenses, the court could order it frozen or returned," she explained. "But we need to act quickly before more funds are dispersed." We discussed options ranging from a formal legal challenge to a structured family intervention with legal representation present. Given the sensitive nature of Brandon's gambling addiction and my desire to avoid public exposure that might harm his potential recovery, I opted for the latter approach, at least as a first step. A strategic intervention with witnesses and evidence can sometimes achieve a resolution without court proceedings, Lydia advised, but you should be prepared for the possibility that litigation may become necessary. She helped me draft formal letters requesting documentation of Grandma Eleanor's most recent will, an accounting of all estate transactions, and the immediate freezing of remaining assets pending investigation. These would be presented during the confrontation, with copies retained as evidence of our attempt to resolve matters privately. Next came the question of who should be present. Nathan was an obvious choice. His unwavering support had been my lifeline. Aunt Martha's legal background and first-hand knowledge of the family dynamics made her another essential ally. I also asked Judith to attend, as she had been a witness to Grandma's updated will. The most difficult decision was whether to include extended family members. Rachel offered to be there, but I worried about creating the impression of ganging up on my parents, which might make them more defensive. In the end, I decided to keep the group small but impactful. The final participant would be Lydia herself. Having legal representation present would signal the seriousness of the situation and provide expert guidance if the conversation veered into technical aspects of estate law. Choosing the location required careful consideration. My parents' home would give them too much psychological advantage, while a neutral public space lacked the privacy such a confrontation required. After some deliberation, I decided to rent a conference room at a local business centre, professional, private, and symbolically appropriate for a meeting about financial matters. Nathan helped me prepare for various reaction scenarios. My parents might deny everything, attempt to paint me as greedy or unstable, try to divide the assembled allies, or even walk out entirely. For each possibility, we developed a response strategy focused on maintaining calm, returning to documented facts, and clearly stating the consequences of continued deception. "The key is to stay focused on the evidence," Nathan reminded me during our rehearsals. "The moment it becomes emotional, they'll use that to dismiss your concerns." The night before the confrontation, I could barely sleep. The weight of what I was about to do, challenging the parents I'd spent my life trying to please, felt almost unbearable. What if I was wrong? What if there was a reasonable explanation for everything I'd discovered? But each time doubt crept in, I returned to the evidence. The hidden correspondence about Grandma's updated will, the financial transactions that made no sense for legitimate business purposes, the years of being manipulated into putting my life on hold while Brandon received endless support. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. For me, for Grandma Eleanor's wishes, and even for Brandon, who would never recover while enabled by our parents. Morning arrived with a strange calm. I dressed carefully in my most professional outfit, a charcoal suit, I usually reserved for presenting to major clients. Nathan made breakfast, though neither of us ate much. Aunt Martha called to check in, her voice steady and reassuring. "Remember, you're not just doing this for yourself," she said. "Eleanor trusted you to execute her true wishes. You're honouring her as much as standing up for yourself." As I gathered my documentation, organised in labelled folders with supporting Evidence highlighted and tabbed. My phone buzzed with a text from my private investigator, Diane. Urgent new information, it read. Calling now. The timing couldn't have been worse, but something told me this couldn't wait. I answered immediately. I've been monitoring your brother's movements as requested, Diane said without preamble. He just met with the same individuals from the previous surveillance. Based on body language and the visible exchange of documents, I believe he's received another significant loan using the business investment as collateral. My heart sank. You mean he's taking even more money from loan sharks? That's my assessment, she confirmed. And one more thing. Your parents were present at this meeting. They arrived separately, but were clearly part of the discussion. The final piece clicked into place. My parents weren't just enabling Brandon's addiction, they were actively participating in the dangerous financial maneuvers to sustain it. The situation was even worse than I'd imagined. I'm sending you photos now, Diane continued. They're time-stamped and geotagged. I thought you should have them before your meeting today. Within minutes, the images appeared in my email. Brandon. Looking tense but relieved, my father shaking hands with a hard-faced man in an expensive suit, my mother clutching her purse with white knuckles. The photos were clear, undeniable evidence of their involvement. I added them to my documentation and took a deep breath. Any lingering doubts evaporated. This confrontation wasn't just necessary, it was urgent. My family was spiralling into dangerous territory, and I might be the only one who could stop them. Ready? Nathan asked, keys in hand. I nodded, gathering the last of my evidence. As ready as I'll ever be. As we drove to the business centre, where I would finally confront my parents with the truth, I felt a strange mixture of dread and determination. Years of being the family peacekeeper had not prepared me for this moment, but perhaps they had prepared me for what would come after, rebuilding a relationship with my family based on truth rather than manipulation, or finding the strength to walk away if that proved impossible. Either way, I knew that after today nothing would ever be the same. The conference room I'd rented was deliberately impersonal. Beige walls, a long polished table, ergonomic chairs. Nothing to distract from the conversation ahead. I'd arrived an hour early to arrange the documentation, set up a small recording device, with Lydia's approval, and try to calm my racing heart. Aunt Martha arrived first, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun that matched her expression. She squeezed my hand wordlessly before taking a seat to my right. Judith and Patricia followed, both looking sombre but determined. Nathan positioned himself at my left, a physical reminder that I wasn't facing this alone. Lydia was the last to arrive before my parents, professional in a navy suit, carrying a slim briefcase. Remember, she murmured as she took her place, stick to facts, not emotions. If they try to derail the conversation, bring it back to the documented evidence. At exactly 2:00, the door opened. My father entered first, his confident stride faltering slightly as he registered the assembled group. My mother followed, her practiced social smile freezing when she spotted Aunt Martha. "What is this?" Dad demanded, remaining standing. "Emily, you said this was about resolving the inheritance issue." "It is," I said, gesturing to the empty chairs across the table. "Please sit down, we have a lot to discuss." "Who's this?" Mum asked, eyeing Lydia suspiciously. "Lydia Chen, estate attorney," she replied, offering a business card. "I'm here at Emily's request to help facilitate this discussion." "You brought a lawyer?" Dad's voice rose. "This is a family matter." "It became a legal matter when you misrepresented Grandma Eleanor's will," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Please sit down, Dad." The door opened again and Brandon appeared, looking confused. "Sorry I'm late. Mum said you wanted to discuss the business investment." His eyes widened as he took in the gathering. "What's going on?" "That's what we'd all like to know," Dad said, finally taking a seat. Mum and Brandon followed suit, exchanging uneasy glances. I took a deep breath and opened the first folder. 3 months ago, Grandma Eleanor passed away. At the time, you told me her will left the distribution of her estate to Dad's discretion as executor. Based on that claim, you redirected what should have been my inheritance, $450,000, to Brandon's supposed tech startup. My father's face remained impassive. As I've explained, I made a decision that would benefit the family as a whole. Except that wasn't your decision to make, I continued, sliding a copy of Grandma's correspondence with James Foster across the table. Grandma Eleanor updated her will 8 months before her stroke. She explicitly left the bulk of her estate to me, with a separate trust for Brandon, contingent upon his completion of a gambling addiction program. Brandon flinched visibly. My mother's hand flew to her throat. Where did you get that? That's private correspondence. From Grandma's. Personal effects, the ones you were so eager to have me store rather than review, I said. And it's just the beginning. Over the next 30 minutes, I methodically presented the evidence I'd gathered. The suspicious withdrawals from Grandma's accounts before her death, my parents' remortgaging of their paid-off home, the timing of their sudden home renovations, and most damning of all, the surveillance photos showing their meeting with Brandon's investors. These men aren't tech investors, I said, pushing the photos toward my father. They're loan sharks, and you're using my inheritance to pay Brandon's gambling debts. Brandon stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. I need some air. He moved toward the door, but Nathan stepped into his path. Running away won't solve this, Brandon, he said quietly. It's time to face it. For a moment, I thought my brother might try to push past him. Instead, his shoulders slumped and he turned back to the table. It's not what you think, he began. It's exactly what I think, I interrupted. You've been gambling away everything our parents have given you, and when that wasn't enough, they decided to give you my inheritance, too. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, Brandon exploded. These guys don't take no for an answer. They were threatening me, threatening all of us. The room fell silent. It was the first honest thing my brother had said in years. My mother reached for his hand. Brandon, don't. We agreed. Agreed to what? I demanded. To lie to me, to steal my inheritance, to keep enabling Brandon's addiction instead of getting him actual help. We were protecting him, Mom cried. What were we supposed to do, let those people hurt him? You were supposed to get him professional help, Aunt Martha interjected, not mortgage your future, and Emily's, to pay off loan sharks. My father, who had remained ominously quiet, finally spoke. You have no idea what we've been dealing with, he said, his voice dangerously low. Years of trying to keep this family together, to protect our son. At my expense, I finished for him. Every time. And what about protecting Grandma Eleanor's wishes? What about honouring what she wanted for me after years of watching you favour Brandon? Your grandmother didn't understand the situation, Dad insisted. She was being manipulated by outside influences. He glared at Judith and Patricia. Eleanor knew exactly what was happening, Patricia said firmly. She changed her will to protect Emily from exactly this scenario. And to ensure Brandon would get help, Judith added. Real help, not another bailout. Brandon's face crumpled. Is that true? Grandma knew about the gambling. She hired a private investigator, I told him. She knew everything, and she still loved you, Brandon. She set up a trust that would help you recover, not enable you to sink deeper. A trust that you would control, Dad said bitterly, giving you power over your brother's future. Making me responsible for his recovery, I corrected. Again. But at least this time it would have been my choice, with boundaries and conditions. Lydia, who had been taking notes, looked up. Mr. and Mrs. Williams, I need to be very clear about the legal implications here. If what Emily has presented is accurate, and the documentation is compelling, you could be facing charges of fraud, undue influence, and misappropriation of estate assets. My mother paled. You wouldn't. We're your parents, Emily. Parents? Who stole from me? I said, my voice breaking. Who've been using me as Brandon's safety net my entire life. Who convinced me to put my dreams on hold while doing everything possible to enable his self-destruction. That's not fair, Dad protested. We love both our children. Differently, I finished. You love us differently. I've always been the responsible one, the one who would understand, the one who would sacrifice. Brandon's been the one who needs help, who deserves second chances, who can't be held accountable. Brandon, to my surprise, didn't deny it. She's right, he said quietly. You've always made excuses for me, always found ways to bail me out. I never had to face consequences. My parents stared at him in shock. It was perhaps the first time he'd ever acknowledged his role in the family dynamic. The gambling started in college, he continued, avoiding their eyes. Small bets at first, then bigger ones. By the time I came to you about the coffee subscription business, I was already in deep. When you bailed me out without asking too many questions, it became a pattern. Why stop when there were always more chances, more money, more bailouts? Brandon, stop, Mum pleaded. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do, he insisted. I'm tired of lying. I'm tired of being afraid all the time. He turned to me. I'm sorry, Em. I never meant for it to go this far. How far has it gone? I asked quietly. How much do you owe these people? He named a figure that made my mother whimper. It was substantially more than my inheritance. They've given us 2 months to pay the rest, Dad admitted, suddenly looking every year of his age. We thought the app story would buy us time to figure something out. There is no app, is there? I asked Brandon. He shook his head. Just a shell company to make the money transfers look legitimate. The truth hung in the room like a physical presence. My family had been living a lie for years, and I'd been the last to know. So what happens now? Dad asked, looking between me and Lydia. Are you going to press charges, destroy what's left of this family? The question brought me to the crux of my dilemma. I could pursue legal action, potentially recovering my inheritance but fracturing the family permanently. Or I could find another way forward, one that addressed the real issues rather than just the financial consequences. That depends, I said carefully, on whether you're finally ready to deal with the actual problem instead of just its symptoms. What do you mean? Mom asked. I mean Brandon needs real help for his gambling addiction, professional help, not family enablement. I mean you both need to acknowledge how you've manipulated me and my life to serve as Brandon's safety net. And I mean we all need to start being honest about what this family dynamic has done to each of us. I slid a document across the table, not a legal complaint, but a proposal. This outlines what I believe needs to happen, I explained. Brandon enters a residential treatment program for gambling addiction. You attend family therapy to address the enabling patterns. I receive a promissory note for the inheritance amount, secured by your assets. And most importantly, we all commit to rebuilding this family on a foundation of honesty rather than manipulation. My parents exchanged glances, a silent communication I couldn't interpret. And if we agree? Dad finally asked. Then we handle this privately, as a family, I said. No legal action, no public exposure that could harm Brandon's eventual recovery. And if we don't? Mum challenged, a flash of her usual defiance returning. Lydia answered for me. Then Ms. Williams proceeds with a formal contest of the will execution, which would involve court proceedings and potential criminal charges. The room fell silent as my parents considered their options. Brandon stared at his hands while Aunt Martha watched my father with undisguised contempt. Nathan's hand found mine under the table, a silent gesture of support. After what felt like an eternity, my father spoke. "We need time to discuss this." "You have until tomorrow," I said, standing to signal the end of the meeting. "I've spent years giving this family everything I had. I won't wait any longer for fee." Honesty in return. As everyone gathered their belongings, Brandon approached me hesitantly. "For what it's worth," he said in a low voice, "I am sorry, Em. Not just about the money. About everything." It was the first genuine apology I'd ever received from my brother. It wasn't enough to heal the wounds of years of betrayal, but it was a start. As I watched my family file out of the conference room, my parents looking shaken, Brandon subdued, I realised we had reached a turning point. Whatever happened next, the old patterns had been irrevocably broken. The truth, painful as it was, had finally been spoken aloud. Whether that truth would destroy my family or finally allow it to heal remained to be seen. The 24 hours following the confrontation were among the longest of my life. Nathan and I barely slept, discussing potential outcomes and what each would mean for our future. By morning, I'd resigned myself to the likelihood of a protracted, legal battle. My parents had spent decades protecting Brandon at my expense. I didn't expect them to change overnight. So when my phone rang at exactly noon, the deadline I'd given them, I was prepared for defiance, not capitulation. "We need to talk," my father said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Not over the phone. Can you come to the house? Just you." I hesitated, wary of being manipulated without my support system. "I'm bringing Nathan." Dad sighed. "Fine, but no lawyers this time. This needs to be family." 2 hours later, Nathan and I pulled into my parents' driveway. The ostentatious new furniture that had decorated their living room just weeks ago was gone, replaced by their old, well-worn pieces. It was the first sign that something significant had changed. My parents and Brandon were waiting in the living room, arranged like actors before a difficult scene. Mum's eyes were red-rimmed, Dad looked haggard, and Brandon looked almost unrecognisable. The cocky facade had vanished, replaced by something raw and vulnerable. "Thank you for coming," Dad began formally. "We've been talking a lot since yesterday. There are things you need to know." What followed was a confession that altered my understanding of our family in ways I never could have anticipated. "Brandon's gambling addiction is real," Dad said. "But it's not the whole story. The truth is your mother and I have been in financial trouble for years." Mum nodded, staring at her clasped hands. "The business hasn't been profitable since the recession. We've been living on credit, refinancing, taking cash advances, anything to maintain appearances. When Brandon came to us about his gambling, debts 3 years ago we were already underwater," Dad continued. "We couldn't bail him out as we had in the past. But we also couldn't admit to anyone, especially you, that we were struggling." "Why not?" I asked. "I'm an accountant. I could have helped restructure your finances." "Pride," Mum said simply. "We couldn't bear for you to know we'd failed. You've always looked up to your father as this successful businessman, this provider. The truth would have shattered that image. So instead of asking for my help, you lied to me. For years." Dad nodded, shame evident in his expression. "We thought we could turn things around. Each decision seemed justifiable in the moment, a temporary measure until business improved." "But it never did," Brandon interjected. "And my gambling made everything worse. When those men started threatening me, Mum and Dad mortgaged the house to pay them off. But it was never enough. They always wanted more." A horrifying realisation dawned on me. So the inheritance wasn't just about enabling Brandon. You needed it to save yourselves too. "We were drowning," Mum admitted. "When your grandmother changed her will to leave everything to you, it felt like our last lifeline was being cut. We convinced ourselves that redirecting the money was temporary, that once the business recovered and Brandon got back on his feet, we'd repay you somehow. But that was never going to happen, was it? I asked. The business isn't going to recover, and Brandon's debts keep growing. The silence that followed was answer enough. After yesterday, Dad said finally, we realised we can't continue this. We're selling the business. It's not worth much, but it's a start. The house too. We should have done it years ago, Mum added. Started over with something smaller, more manageable, but we were too proud. What about Brandon's debt to these loan sharks? Nathan asked, speaking for the first time. Brandon answered, I've agreed to enter a residential treatment program. There's one in Arizona that specialises in gambling addiction. They also have resources to help negotiate with creditors. I studied my brother, looking for signs of the usual facile charm that preceded his broken promises. Instead, I saw only exhaustion and shame. Why the change of heart? I asked, directing the question to all of them. Dad cleared his throat. When you laid out all the evidence yesterday, showed us the pattern of behaviour over years, we couldn't deny it anymore. We've been living in a house of cards, and it's finally collapsing. And last night, Mom added, Brandon told us something that changed everything. My brother met my eyes directly. I told them I was thinking about suicide, he said quietly. The pressure, the lies, the debt, it was too much. I couldn't see any way out. The room seemed to tilt. For all my anger at Brandon, I'd never wanted this. That was our wake-up call, Dad said, his voice breaking. No amount of money or pride is worth losing our son. Or our daughter, he added, looking at me. We've already lost so much of our relationship with you through our actions. The revelation cast our family dynamic in a new light. My parents hadn't just been favouring Brandon out of some arbitrary preference. They'd been desperately trying to keep him alive, albeit in ways that ultimately enabled his self-destruction. And they'd been hiding their own financial failure, unable to admit they needed help. It didn't excuse what they'd done, but it made it comprehensible in a way it hadn't been before. So, what happens now? I asked. Dad pushed a folder across the coffee table. This is everything. Our complete financial picture, documentation of all transactions related to your grandmother's estate, and a signed acknowledgement that the inheritance rightfully belongs to you. We can't pay it back immediately, Mum said. But we've outlined a repayment plan, secured by the proceeds from selling the business and house. I opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. They were comprehensive and appeared genuine, a complete financial surrender. There's something else, Dad said, reaching for another envelope. Patricia brought this by this morning. She said Grandma Eleanor left it with her, to be delivered when it was needed most. I accepted the sealed envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter written in my grandmother's distinctive script, dated just weeks before her stroke. My dearest Emily, it began. If you're reading this, it means the concerns I've had about your parents' finances and Brandon's troubles have come to a head. I've observed for years how your bright spirit has been dimmed by the burdens placed unfairly on your shoulders. The inheritance I've left you is meant to free you from those burdens, not add to them. But money alone cannot heal a broken family. If Richard and Margaret have mishandled my wishes, as I fear they might, remember that true wealth lies in honest relationships built on mutual respect. You deserve nothing less. Whatever you decide, to fight for what is rightfully yours or to find another path forward, know that I am proud of the woman you've become. Your compassion has never been a weakness, though others may have exploited it. It is your greatest strength, and it will guide you to the right decision for you. All my love, Grandma Eleanor. Tears blurred my vision as I refolded the letter. Even from beyond the grave, my grandmother had understood what I needed most, not just financial security, but validation that my feelings mattered. In that moment, I faced the most difficult decision of my confrontation journey. I could insist on immediate legal action to secure my inheritance, potentially pushing my already desperate family over the edge. Or I could find a middle path that acknowledged the harm done while creating space for healing. I need you to understand something, I said finally, looking at each family member in turn. What you did wasn't just about money. You manipulated me. You used my love for this family against me. You made me doubt my own worth, my own perceptions. That damage doesn't disappear with a repayment plan. We know, Mum said softly. We don't expect forgiveness right away, or maybe ever. We just want a chance to try to make things right. I took a deep breath. These are my conditions. Brandon enters the residential program immediately, with progress reports shared with me. You both attend financial counselling and family therapy. The repayment plan is formalised with legal documentation, and most importantly, complete honesty from now on. No more secrets, no more manipulation. And if we agree? Dad asked. Then I won't pursue legal action. We'll try to rebuild one step at a time. Nathan squeezed my hand, silently supporting whatever decision I made. We agree to all of it, Dad said without hesitation. And Emily, thank you. Not just for this chance, but for being the one person in this family with the courage to speak the truth. It wasn't a perfect resolution. The money would take years to repay if it ever was fully. The trust that had been broken wouldn't be easily restored. But as we worked through the practical details of the agreement, I felt something I hadn't expected: hope. Not hope that everything would magically be fixed, but hope that by confronting the toxic patterns that had defined our family for decades, we might eventually build something healthier. Something real. As Nathan and I drove home, that evening he asked, "Are you sure about this? You'd have every right to take more aggressive action." I thought about Grandma Eleanor's letter, about Brandon's desperation, about my parents' belated honesty. "I'm not doing this for them," I said finally. "I'm doing it for me. Living with anger and resentment would just be another way they control my life. This way, I set the terms. I decide what role they play in my future." For the first time since that devastating family dinner, I felt like I was truly in control of my own story. Whatever happened next, whether my family lived up to their promises or not, I had reclaimed my power by speaking my truth and establishing boundaries that respected my worth. It wasn't the resolution I'd expected, but perhaps it was the one I needed. 6 months can change everything or nothing at all. In my case, it transformed landscapes I'd thought were permanent features of my life. The most obvious change was professional. 2 months after the confrontation, I was called into George's office expecting the worst. My personal drama had affected my work, despite my best efforts to compartmentalise. Instead, he offered me a promotion. "The way you handled your family's financial crisis showed exactly the skills we need in a senior manager," he explained. "Strategic thinking under pressure, clear documentation, the ability to navigate complex emotional terrain while still focusing on financial realities. Not everyone can do that." The irony wasn't lost on me. The very situation that had nearly broken me personally had advanced me professionally. The salary increase wouldn't replace my inheritance overnight, but it was a significant step toward financial independence. Nathan and I adjusted our house plans. Instead of the craftsman dream home, we purchased a smaller starter house that needed work but had good bones, rather like our relationship after weathering this storm. On weekends, we stripped wallpaper and refinished floors, building our future with our own hands. The most profound changes, however, were in my family relationships. Brandon completed the 90-day residential program in Arizona and transitioned to outpatient treatment. During family weekend at the facility, he shared insights that left me stunned. "I was jealous of you," he admitted during a supervised session. "You always seemed so capable, so certain of your path. I felt like I was constantly trying to prove my worth by taking bigger risks, making bigger statements. I was jealous of you too, I confessed. Everyone's eyes lit up when you walked into a room. You got endless chances while I had to be perfect, just to be noticed. These honest conversations, painful but necessary, continued as Brandon worked his program. The gambling wasn't gone. Addiction doesn't disappear in 6 months. But he was facing it directly now, without the safety net of enablement. My parents sold their business to a competitor and downsized to a modest condo. The transition was harder, for them than anyone. Dad, particularly, struggled with the loss of status that came with admitting financial failure. I built my entire identity around being successful, he said during one of our bi-weekly family therapy sessions. When that started slipping away, I couldn't admit it, not to others, not even to myself, so I created this elaborate fiction and dragged everyone into it. Mum nodded. We thought we were protecting everyone, but we were really just protecting our own egos. The financial counselling they'd agreed to attend was beginning to show results. They lived on a strict budget now, tracking every expense with the diligence they should have shown decades earlier. The repayment plan for my inheritance was formalised in legal documents, with modest monthly payments that would increase as their situation stabilised. I harboured no illusions that I'd see the full amount any time soon, if ever. The money mattered less to me now than the acknowledgement of what had happened and the commitment to change. Our first holiday gathering after the confrontation was awkward, but healing. Hosted at our new home rather than my parents' house, a symbolic shift in family power dynamics, it featured simple food, modest gifts, and conversations that sometimes lapsed into uncomfortable silence. But there were also moments of genuine connection, like when Brandon helped me wash dishes and quietly thanked me for not giving up on him when you had every right to. The extended family adjusted to our new reality with varying degrees of acceptance. Aunt Martha became a regular visitor, her blunt assessments of our progress both challenging and refreshing. Cousin Rachel and I rebuilt our relationship, free from the family secrets that had created distance between us. Not everyone approved of my decision to work toward reconciliation rather than legal action. Some relatives thought I was being too forgiving, setting myself up for future exploitation. Others felt I was being too harsh, imposing too many conditions on family relationships that should be unconditional. But I'd learned that healthy love has boundaries, and I was finally establishing mine. The most unexpected development came 3 months after our confrontation. My godmother, Patricia, Grandma Eleanor's dear friend, passed away suddenly from a heart attack. To my shock, she had left me her entire estate, a modest but significant sum that almost perfectly matched what my original inheritance would have been. She always said you reminded her of Eleanor at her best, Judith told me at the memorial service. Strong, compassionate, but finally learning to value yourself. The inheritance felt like cosmic justice, not a replacement for what my family had taken, but a reminder that sometimes the universe balances its books in unexpected ways. I used a portion to establish an emergency fund that would ensure Nathan and I would never be financially vulnerable again. The rest I set aside, unsure yet how best to honour Patricia's and Grandma Eleanor's legacies. As spring arrived, bringing new life to the garden Nathan and I had planted around our modest home, I found myself reflecting on what family truly means. Blood connections had always been paramount in the Williams household, family loyalty above all else, even when that loyalty enabled destruction. But true family, I'd come to realise, is built on mutual respect and honesty. Sometimes blood relatives earn that designation. Sometimes, like Nathan and his supportive parents, or Aunt Martha with her unflinching honesty, or even my new colleagues who had rallied around me during my crisis, family is found rather than born. One sunny afternoon, as I sat on our new porch, reviewing a business proposal, an idea began to take shape. All these years of managing finances, of watching the damage that financial secrecy and manipulation could cause, there was wisdom there that might help others. 2 weeks later, I filed paperwork to establish a non-profit organisation, Financial Clarity Family Counselling. Its mission was simple: to provide education and support for families struggling with financial communication, addiction-related financial issues, and the emotional aspects of money management. "You're turning your pain into purpose," Nathan observed as I showed him the business plan. "That's incredible, Em." "It feels right," I said. All those years of being the responsible one, the financial manager for a family in denial, maybe it was preparing me for something bigger than just being their safety net. Brandon, now 6 months sober, asked if he could volunteer once he reached his 1-year milestone. "I know both sides of financial addiction," he said. "Maybe that perspective could help someone else." My parents' reaction was more complex. Pride mingled with shame at the public acknowledgement of our family's struggles. But they too offered to share their experience once they felt more secure in their recovery. As I write this now, looking back on the journey from that devastating family dinner to where I stand today, I'm struck by how differently things turned out than I expected. I didn't get a dramatic courtroom vindication. My parents didn't face legal consequences for their actions. My inheritance wasn't restored in one satisfying swoop of justice. Instead, I got something more valuable: the truth. The painful, complicated truth about my family, yes, but also truth about myself, my worth, my boundaries, my capacity for both justice and compassion. I learned that standing up for yourself doesn't always look like a Hollywood ending. Sometimes it's messy and imperfect. Sometimes reconciliation is harder than revenge. I don't know what the future holds for my family. Recovery, financial, emotional, relational, is a long road with setbacks and disappointments. There are still days when anger resurfaces, when I question my decision to work toward healing rather than punishment. But I do know this: I am no longer the family safety net, the reliable daughter whose needs always come last. I am Emily Williams, a woman who found her voice, established her boundaries, and built a life on her own terms. And that, more than any inheritance, is the legacy I choose to carry forward. Have you ever had to confront difficult truths in your family? Did you choose healing or distance, forgiveness or accountability? I'd love to know your stories in the comments below. This journey has taught me that sharing our experiences, even the painful ones, helps others feel less alone in their struggles. If my story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more reflections on family dynamics, financial honesty, and the courage to speak truth to those we love. Leave a like if you believe in the power of setting healthy boundaries, even with family. And share this video with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in navigating complicated family relationships. Thank you for witnessing my story. Remember, true family, whether blood or chosen, is built on respect, honesty, and love that sees us clearly, without conditions or manipulation.